We return. We return. We return. Return again. We return. We return. We return. Return again and again to we return again to love. We return. We return. We return. Return again. We return. We return. We return. We return. Return again and again to home. Home. We return again to home.
Welcome back to Yom Kippur afternoon here at Temple Emanuel. I'm Rabbi Joe Black, the senior rabbi.
Cantor Liz Sachs, senior cantor.
Aha.
Rabbi Emily Hyatt, associate rabbi.
And I'm Steve Brodsky, cantorial soloist and music director. We're also very happy to have our accompanist and choir director, Ken Mervine, joining us this afternoon.
As we come together in worship, we reflect in community. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts inspire us to reach for the holiness that is within us and around us. May our prayers and our hopes unite us in the hope for a better tomorrow. This afternoon, we will learn together with our guest, Leanne Palaciapo, and then move through Mincha, our afternoon prayers, including reading the book of Jonah. And this will be followed by our concluding or Ne'ilah services when we utter the last prayers of the day, asking God to open the gates of repentance for us and the world, and concluding with the sounding of the shofar.
At this hour, Israel stands as one in prayer, our tradition uniting us through memory and hope. We look at one another and we know who we are. We look to our Creator and we know our strength. In pursuit of truth, this people lives to serve the Most High for the sake of life. Behind us, pain and glory. Before us, holy work. Timeless words command us. Toward eternity we gaze.
We return. We return. We return. Return again. You guys know it by now. We return. We return. We return. Return again and again to you. We return again to you.
is now my pleasure to invite Leanne Colachiapo to join with me up on the bima as we have a little discussion about truth. You're mic'd already. Wonderful. Please have a seat. So welcome to this day when we're not doing a whole lot here at Temple Emanuel. We're just sort of hanging
Quiet
out.
day here.
It's pretty laid back.
Yeah.
So welcome. You are the editor of the Denver Post, but tell us a little bit about yourself, about your journey, how you got to where you are now.
All right. Yes. So I grew up not too far from here in southeast Denver and went to Thomas Jefferson. Then
Well, give her a chance to people apply.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I left for college. I decided when I was a senior in high school, I was watching TV and I was watching, I don't even remember what, but anchor, a news person giving a report from somewhere. And I thought, what I really thought is that person knows everything before everybody else. And so I want to know everything before everybody else
You're
too.
one of
That
those, huh?
wasn't as high-minded as I want to tell the truth to the world. And so I went off to college to Drake University in Des Moines. And and I got my journalism degree there, and then worked at a few papers along the way. I went headed to Appalachia in Tennessee for my first job, and from there to South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, where I got married 30 years ago. Just had our 30th anniversary.
Mazel tov.
And then back to Des Moines, to the Des Moines Register, and then in 1999 I came back to Denver and got a job at the Denver Post, and went through a series of different editing jobs there, just kind of moving up the chain of command. City editor, handled our investigative team for a while, was second in command for a while, and then became editor in 2016.
Wonderful. So, this is a softball question.
Okay, good.
They're all softball questions, don't worry. We're talking about truth, and as I said in my sermon last night, a couple weeks ago, we talked about spiritual truth, and now we want to talk about the role of truth in the public sphere. So before we get to that, tell me, how has the newspaper business changed over the course of your career? How much time do we have?
Yeah, right. I mean, for clarity, I learned I was using a typewriter in college, so there's that change.
Me too.
But fundamentally, even by the time I got to Denver, the internet wasn't really a part of our operation. Like, we still depended on the print paper, and maybe sometime in the night, I worked the night shift for a while, somebody come down from online, they were on a different floor, and we'd tell them 2 or 3 stories they could put online, and never really thought that much more about it. And of course, with that meant that we only published once a day. It also meant that we, the people in the room at the newspaper, would just sit in a little room, a few editors, and decide what the big story was of the day. And that's how we would decide what would get played up. And if it was interesting to us, that's what we would cover. And that's been one of the big changes around the internet, is you know what people are interested in. You also know what should be important. And you spend a lot more time trying to figure out how to meld those two together so that you don't write. Obviously, we don't want to just write about silly things. But we also know that so many important things you've got to think through a lot more carefully about how to present them, how to write them, when to publish them, so that people will eat their spinach too.
Sure. I like spinach. It's interesting you say that, because at the beginning of your career, you sat around a table and you decided, and now you're...
Well, actually, it was all men, but now, if I'd been there, though. Yeah, it was...
I believe that, and I'm very glad you are where you are. We need that desperately in our society.
Sorry.
No, it's good. So, but now it seems like the internet is becoming the arbiter or the driving force. Do you find that you're playing catch up with what other people are thinking is important?
There are times there are times when that occurs, and sometimes they're right? Sometimes people have identified something, and you look at it and you go, "Goodness, we haven't really covered that enough." I might argue that we were slow to homelessness as an issue inside the city as one example. Particularly as some of the encampments and stuff were taking off, we were working from home. We didn't necessarily see it with our own eyes, and so we got a little bit behind. But also, an advantage to be in the Denver Post is you do get to stake your flag in now and then and say, you know, this publication or that might be chasing after this story, but that's not who we are. That's not core to our mission, and so we're not going to do that. Also, the dawn of digital subscriptions has mattered a lot in how we can think about what news we cover and what we don't. Reason being that when everything was free, you know, you could be kind of driven by, oh, they're reading this, they're reading that, we need to do, you know, you could really fall into that. With digital subscriptions, we are able to see what a person is reading on when they go and get their credit card and subscribe. And that's very different than just the kind of stuff they might randomly click on. And so there you do see that people are reading serious political stories, stories about homelessness. Injustice is a really big area for us. And Broncos.
Of course. Of course. So our theme for the High Holy Days is truth. And personally and then professionally, what does truth mean to you? Because we have so many different definitions flying out there.
Oh, yeah, that's the softball question.
That's the
right.
softball question, yeah.
It's complicated in journalism, and it's evolving in journalism, and it's evolving in my own mind, and it's evolving with the new people who are entering the industry. When I was coming up, first of all, whatever your own thinking was about what was true, the idea was that didn't matter. Like you put that, you bury that, you get that down, and you. In many ways, healthful way, open your mind to more new ideas, right? And that's healthy because one of the problems we see now is where people get so sure of what they believe to be true that they don't open their minds to other ideas. And so this forced you to listen to everybody and come back and try to retell what you had learned through the day in your days as a reporter, report it, if you will, as the term comes from, and bring all these ideas in.
Sure.
And it's still a core part of what we do. But with time and with feedback, to the point about not every fact, a fact isn't always true in and of itself without context, and there's a saying that journalism without judgment isn't journalism, and so you begin to try to bring in and understand more broadly what the real bigger story is, if you will, the underlying currents, the underlying truths, and bring those up. And with that comes in many people's desire is to be able to express themselves more in the stories that they're telling, or in the way they live their lives. You know, we would traditionally say, and this came up a lot in some of the early women's marches around the beginning of the Trump administration, and I never had so many volunteers to work a march in my life as that was, because we would not permit people to participate, and they would say, but for me, this is who I am, this is core to who I am, and my role as a journalist shouldn't preclude me from attending a pride or a march of whatever it might be, or a demonstration, because that matters to me. So that's sort of I don't know if that gets at it, but that's sort of an evolving area of it.
Sure. So how does media, and I'm using the word media, even though you're in the newspaper business, at this point you're in the newspaper. I mean, our family is one of the few families that still gets the post delivered because we like to do the crossword puzzles. I think that's basically
Fair enough. Same.
But we also get it online. We get it in the morning. We get it in the afternoon. I mean, you really are covering everything. But how does media help promote truth, and how does it hurt truth?
It can promote it. It can promote it by what it highlights as important, and by pointing out where the public discourse has gone off the rails, and to try to just keep bringing it back again and again. I'm brought to mind of a woman I know who runs the New York Times News Service. And when she was younger, she ran the New York Times International Desk. And she was telling me this story about how every day she was wanting to put stories up. She kept pitching stories about the Sudan. And her bosses would be like, Sudan again? Really? Do we have to do Sudan again? And she's like, yes, we are going to keep writing about the Sudan until people understand and are willing to open up and understand what's going on there. And to that end, media can play such an important role in highlighting those sorts of things. Media, though, is a huge institution, a part of the power of a community, and with that, when it gets it wrong, it can do horrible damage. I mean, I don't know of here of people in the world would know that can happen. That
Sure.
The media can pick up a very false story and tell it and amplify it in a way that is nothing short of destructive. And that's where, and that's really in some ways where having more, that's an upside to the internet, if you will, because you do get more instant feedback from people who are like, you just got that wrong. And if you're not too arrogant to listen, you can say, well, I guess we did, and let's try to rethink how we're approaching this.
You know, the idea of a free press is central to what I believe, and I think most of us grew up understanding. But we are seeing increasingly that different press organizations have specific biases. Is that a new trend, or has it always been that way? We just haven't seen it as much. I mean, when I grew up, we listened to Walter Cronkite, or we read the New York Times, and that was we believed it because it came from God, basically.
Right.
But now you can live in a bubble and hear whatever perception you want.
Well, you're not old enough to have known the way back, right? Media, newspapers at least, as the oldest form, I suppose, it has evolved over time. They have gone from the early days, colonial times, if you will, want to just start there.
I was not there.
Right. And where they were, everybody, they all had opinions, right? And that's just what they built about. And some papers to this day carry names left over from that, Democratic Gazette, whatever it might be. And so you had these very biased viewpoints, and everybody just understood that's what it was. It was told from a point of view. That only really began changing when the business model changed, and advertisers came in. And advertisers didn't really want to put their name or their mattress or refrigerator or whatever in front of and be making half the people mad. So it was really to kind of grow that part of the business that tone began to change, and you moved your opinion over to an editorial page and placed it more soundly there.
It's fascinating because you think that advertising or commercialism would drive you in one direction, but you're saying it drove us in the other direction. It moved away from being a bias and more towards being more universal, so you can sell more papers. You
could sell more papers.
That's amazing. Thank you. I didn't know that. That's remarkable. By the way, Steve Stark is walking around with cards and golf pencils, and if you have a question, feel free to write it down, and we will try and get it answered here. Given this is a tough one for you. Sorry, but given the plethora of national and international free news sources available today, how can you keep local newspapers relevant?
People will complain to us that a Denver Post subscription, for example, costs more, or at least as much as a New York Times subscription. They go, we could get so much, the whole world, with the New York Times. And, but we do know that people, our readers, care about their local community. It's where they live, and they're raising their children, and it's their schools, and their tax money, and what they see every day. I think most local media have doubled down on that.
Focusing on the...
Brought their focus closer and closer to home. And certainly we see that our readers, I mean, we'll put national news, but it's not particularly well read there. People do go to other sources for that. That's fine. That's not my expertise, certainly. And so we just bring our attention and drive home that for you to live in a state that is the kind of state or city or community you want, being informed about that community is critical, and that's where we find our spot, and it's where we're finding our success also. And you see it even smaller, the little papers, like the little papers that serve Cherry Creek or Washington Park or Douglas County, or that are real hyper local, have enjoyed some immunity from the problems that have faced more regional papers like ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Wow. One of the criticisms that we see of some news outlets is that they exist in a bubble, telling people just what they want to hear. Again, this gets back to the idea of what is truth, or creating outrage or fear or anger that will cause them to want to continue engaging with a news source. Do you think that's true?
Well, I don't like to call them news organizations. I like to call them propaganda organizations.
Okay, good. I do too.
And I mean, they certainly exist. We can't kid ourselves. We can't and we shouldn't kid ourselves about their existence. We know they're there, and some of them do disguise themselves as news organizations. And that's why for most of what I'll just call the mainstream media, the more traditional media, we've tried to double down on differentiating ourselves in ways small and large, and try to say, what makes us different is this or that or the other, including being clear about where our money comes from. We, in the last year at the Post, began making sure that the biographies of our writers were right there, were easy to find. So if people think like, why does this person seem to have this, or what does this person really know about this or that, they can go look up and see kind of what that person's history and training is. And so that you can come to form an opinion about the news source that you're using, and hopefully recognize the difference between that and the bubble news sources, and it's not hard to tell if you've stumbled into one of those, right?
Sure.
They do use loaded language throughout. When you're reading them online, they often don't have links to other kinds of news organizations in there that you can follow. They don't have a full-throated voice from both sides. You can't find it in any kind of story. So there are tells that people can use, but it does fall a lot on the consumer to be aware of what they're looking at.
And that's hard, because then you have to assume that there's an educated populace that you're bringing to, but not everybody has that either sophistication or desire. They just want to hear what they want to hear, read what they want to hear, and know how the Broncos are doing, of course.
And know how the Broncos. Yeah. That's true, and it's a. And it's a scary battle.
Sure.
That we find ourselves in, and that we ourselves have to guard against. I mean, sometimes, just being honest, I don't want to have to hear something that grates on what I think might be true or is off, or that I didn't do right. I can recognize that that's hard to do, and it's made harder when you start hearing rhetoric about how being well-read or knowing what's going on in the broader world is not only not important, but not even desirable.
Right, and the anti-intellectualism
The
that we see
anti-intellectual,
increasingly in society is very frightening.
Yeah, it's very frightening.
Because that can impact truth. You know, when I lived in Jerusalem, first for a year in 1982, it was very clear. Steve, you can bring those up here. It was very clear about, you knew what the bias was of the various news source, and you say, if I want a right-wing news source, I'll go to, the Jerusalem Post. If I want a left-wing news source, I'll go to Haaretz. Or if I want, and I knew that, but if I was just walking up off the street, I wouldn't know that. And we're seeing that increasingly in America more and more. So,
That's a big stack.
it is. All right, so here's one. In what ways do you think that, I was going to ask this one too, so I'll ask it, it's already here. In what ways do you think the Denver Post will be different in 5 and then in 10 years? I mean, so much has changed in the last 4 years.
I mean, we don't actively talk about this, but, so I'm not saying we're doing this. I'm just imagining here. I just want to be really clear about this. But a lot of papers are not printing 7 days a week anymore. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Expense, the carriers got to go out, and one carrier, they have to work 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's not much of a job. And they've rethought what they do with the papers that they do print. We've opposed that for a couple reasons. The thinking being, one, if there's no newspaper, people don't need a newspaper on Monday. Do they think they need one on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, that there's a slope there? And also, we print so many papers at the Post, at our printing plant, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Aurora Sentinel, no, not Aurora anymore, but Aspen Papers, the Gazette, that we're running all the time anyway. But that is one main way that could be changing. I think that the way we handle opinion coverage is going to change quite a bit.
Opinion coverage, yeah.
Yeah,
Talk about
opinion news. And it touches on what we were talking about a minute ago about biased news sources. And in this era, when so many people don't get a newspaper at home, there's just a lot more confusion about what is news and what is opinion. A lot of confusion. And I'll get people who'll say, like, you're supposed to be, why are you so biased? And they'll haul up a story that was written by, it'll be an opinion piece by our editorial page or Doug Friednash or whoever it might be who's writing for us, and they'll be angry that it expressed an opinion and just don't understand that we have two parts of the newsroom, right? Or two parts of our operation, the news and opinion. And I know that this is something we are discussing a lot right now.
Sure.
Is whether we should even do, for example, endorsements. Endorsements have been a part of newspaper coverage forever, but it does confuse people about what your role is in your community. And so do they make sense moving forward? Things like that.
Yeah, but I think, yes, I would hope you do continue to do endorsements. I think it helps clarify, whether there's, I'm going to use the word unbiased because I think it's important. I mean, I know that as a rabbi, I will get criticized that I'm not doing enough on this or I'm doing too much about this, which means that I'm doing my job. And so I would say the same thing to the press, that if they say that the Denver Post is too left or too right, you're doing your job. So,
there you go.
Here's this, Sarah, I don't know if you can, well, I'll ask the question. Many news organizations, even those considered to have liberal bias, are owned by billionaires or large corporations that often lean conservative or have an active interest in preserving the status quo. How do the Denver Post and news organizations in general balance the journalistic mission with ownership, financial, and political goals?
Yeah, that would include us. We're owned by Alden Global Capital, which is a hedge fund. And I've had dinner with them, and no, I can say with complete certainty, they lean further right than most of the staff of the Denver Post, and certainly than the Denver Post editorial position. So the owners, our owners though, and I think this is true of most, but not all, What they want you to do is be a successful business. And so our owners, at least, that's where they come down. They want us to be a successful business. And they just step out of the news. We don't have an issue with them getting involved in the news. They might involve themselves on things like endorsements. Like that would be the kind of thing they might say, but not who we endorse, just should we at all, but not who. They don't get involved at that level. Gannett is public, so they answer to a very large situation. And then you have the billionaire owners, I think, where it's one single person owning the newspaper. That's where you most often hear that's where you are most apt to hear the problem that was described in that question, where one owner, like
Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, right. Where they have, and they may have actual business interests, or it could happen in a community, right, where you have one person owns a local newspaper,
Sure.
and they want to write about something, and it is it just runs counter to that person's interest. That's where you do hear it, and people have quit their jobs over that. Many people have quit their jobs when that happens.
I'm sure. The Atlantic just published an article about the power of Russian trolls impacting what people hear on the left and the right. What have you seen in this regard, and what can be done about this? Is the Post impacted by that?
That goes a little outside my expertise and local. Like, I mean, I've seen it. My knowledge, though, tends to be what I've read, because they tend to try to operate at a more national level. They're not that interested in the Denver's mayor's race.
Yeah,
So,
you never know. I don't know.
You don't know. They could get there.
Here's a good one. In your opinion, what story has the Denver Post carried that has had the greatest impact on our community?
Well, no,
Of
I guess
course,
not.
okay. Which is your favorite child? Yes, I know that.
Yes,
You're right.
I know, right? Boy, that is really tough. I think I don't know if I can pick a favorite child in that, and you can't always see exactly where the impact's going to be. I will tell you that one that comes immediately to mind, and maybe it's because I edited it and was deeply involved, was a project we did around children where the families had contact with human services, and then the children ended up dead some short time afterwards. And we did it in partnership with Channel 9, and it changed laws, and it changed policies, and it changed them fast. And I think, when you see that kind of thing happening, it's why you slog through the business, even through staff reductions and public sentiment that runs against you and hateful phone calls and all that. You stick with it for those days.
There's a question that you're sort of addressing. It's what motivates you to do this work, given all of the frustrations and difficulties that I know that the Post used to be a thicker paper. Now it's...
I know, it's blown off my porch before, I understand. Yeah. I had a lady, so yesterday we had a mistake in the paper. It was a production mistake. And a whole page didn't appear.
Oh.
I know, and it had the advice columns on it.
Oh, no.
And comics. So
oh, no.
I had hundreds of phone calls, me personally, and let alone, the paper as a whole. And some of them were kind of mean. But one of the ladies called back today, and she goes, "I'm sorry that I was so caustic."
Yom Kippur.
Exactly. And she said, "I just want to say I love the Denver Post. I need the Denver Post, and I depend on the Denver Post." I almost cried. But it is sort of that piece where you know that in ways big and small, that you can help people see something a little bit differently, help them think about something a little bit differently. We did stories about metro districts and the way that people were getting trapped in these house payments that they couldn't afford because they didn't understand how metro districts worked. And we heard from so many people who said I was about to do this and I stopped. Thanks to you, I didn't get stuck in a house I couldn't afford, things like that. And those just totally make up for the other stuff. Like it does in any profession, right, where it's hard sometimes.
Sure. As a woman with a big job in media, do you see the role of women improving or evolving? And then the second part is, do you see the Supreme Court's recent actions, I'm assuming about abortion rights, as a threat?
It's been a bit of a surprise to me, given it's 2022. Some of the preconceived notions that you still run into. I'm the first woman to be editor of the Post, and which was surprising in and of itself, given how long we've been around. But I still get people who just don't believe it, who say, no, I want to talk to the real editor, that kind of stuff. So you still get some of that, and name calling and those sorts of things. But I think that as in all sorts of institutions, newspapers, religious institutions, as women have solidified their space, I can see it. I can see a difference in the way we make news judgment. It does impact our news judgment to have more women in the room, as opposed to, it wasn't an exaggeration when I said before, when I started, there were no women in the room making the decisions. There were none. And that you would get talked over, all the things that you hear, trying to get a voice and start to talk, and 3 people interrupt you. And even though I'm talking nonstop now, usually in that situation, I back off. See? Yeah. So I think you do see, you see that making a difference in all sorts of public policy, and in story choices and in who we profile. As for Roe v. Wade, the individual decisions and any other decisions that might come up like that, it's alarming to a huge percent of not just women, but men too. But at the same time, you see how the Colorado legislature reacted, and you see sort of people saying, that happened, why did that happen, where do we go next, what's the path forward? And again, a place where media can play a role is helping to show people how to move forward. So I guess that's the best I can
That's a great
think
answer.
on that.
Thank you. So since it is Yom Kippur, where do you think the media is falling short or missing the mark?
I think, we have to do soul searching. We certainly do. I think, as I had alluded to earlier, I do think that we tend to be in our own bubble too much. You could make a pretty good argument, if just to give a concrete example, would be the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Okay.
And that broke in the New York Post. Nobody else could replicate it. And so it was just sort of like, there's nothing to see here, sort of thing. And Time is not really exactly saying that was quite the right approach, but I do think you saw some unwillingness to say, maybe we should look a little deeper here or there, and there's bound. I use that just because it hits the mainstream media harder than most. We also, and this isn't getting easier for us as journalism becomes a less attractive field for some people to enter, but we have to guard carefully against hiring a bunch of people who are just like ourselves. And bringing diversity into your newsroom, not just, racial diversity for sure, gender diversity, but thought diversity as well, so that you have somebody when you're making a story choice says, well, wait a minute, what about this? Or when you write a headline that isn't quite precise, someone with a different political view to go, hey, look what you just did there, and you go, oh, good point, I didn't see that because I am who I am, I think how I think, and I just didn't catch that headline or that story play wasn't quite right. And so we have to be careful to guard against that. It's one of our biggest blind spots, I think.
Wow, great. As we get back to truth here, the opposite of truth, I don't know what the opposite of truth is. Let's say it's lies for now. But please explain the process involved in making the decision to correct allegations about the, quote, big lie. Why not do that for other prevalent lies when made for political purposes? I'm not sure the second part of that question.
I'm following it. I don't have big, I follow along because you hear it a lot. Like, so an example the other day was a story about that young man, Elijah McClain, who died in Aurora with the ketamine overdose. Right. And I can't remember what story we were writing, but we said he died of a ketamine overdose. And there was a fair amount of pushback that said, why are you not just saying what happened? Say, he was killed by first responders, which is really a strong way to put, I mean, they did inject, but that sort of gets to where sometimes that goes, is like, how are you going to phrase it, and gets more directly to what really happened, and sort of our effort to balance careful word choice without being so careful you misrepresent things. You see it with January 6th. Was that an insurrection or was it a riot? And there are people who say, you've got to always call it an insurrection. Do not call it a riot. It was an insurrection. Well, I think it probably was, it had insurrection-like qualities for sure. But you start using those words that to some people are so clearly what really happened. And it's part of our job sometimes to just step back and go, we just want to be careful here. And we are very careful with saying people lied. Like I don't do it. I hope we never do it. Because that is a suggestion of looking into somebody's intent and their heart, and I'm not a fan of that. I mean, people refer to the big lie. We all know what that is. But to say Donald Trump lied in this case, I'm not a fan of that.
For what reason? You think it's too incendiary, or?
I think that you start down that path, that it gets close to name calling. I don't name call. We don't call people liars. We don't call people names. And I just, it might seem like he lied, or it might seem like this other person lied, but maybe they have some sort of mental, there could be other things. I'm just not ready to ascribe such a vile thing to people without being, I'm not going to do it casually, that's for sure.
Yeah, I bet not. What is the responsibility of the public in keeping the truth in the forefront of the news?
The public, and we've been kind of covered some of this, right? But part of it is to make sure that what you're reading is sufficiently broad, or listening to, is sufficiently broad that you're hearing ideas that maybe rub you a little bit wrong sometimes. Because sometimes, ultimately you'll realize that might be the right way of thinking. There might be something to it. So the public, especially when there's so much news that is, when you can self-select your news so much and pick and choose, and without getting sort of a curated front page like we would produce that would kind of force a mix of ideas out there, force them right in front of your eyes. When you're not getting your news that way, then your responsibility is to curate your own news diet, so it has a little something of everything. That's a big part of what I think the public's responsibility is.
So we shouldn't just watch MSNBC or Fox News. We should also try and switch back and see what everyone is saying.
Yeah.
This is going to be my last question, so that is a cue to those who know what I'm talking about. What are your, I mean, in Jewish tradition, we just celebrated the new year. So what are your hopes for the new year?
For the Post? For news? All right. My hope, and I'm going to have a staff meeting. You get an advanced view of my staff meeting that's coming up.
Great. This is being broadcast. You should know that, so they might.
That's
see
all
it.
right. It's not that secret.
Okay.
No, I think we at the Post, I would like to see a dream a little bit bigger sometimes. Like, we're working from home now, and it is easy for us, as it is for so many people, to fall into our habit of, then I did this, then I'm going to call this person, I got to go to this meeting, got this court thing I got to do. And I want everybody on our staff to step back and in the next year do something really magnificent, something that, as I told them, as I'm telling them, it could be something hugely important to this community, or it could be hugely important to them. Something that is just a thing that is in their mind and that they just feel like, I want to write this story, I want to tell this story, and I just need a little more time to do it. And we're going to be asking people to all come forth with those ideas, with our commitment being we'll find you the time so that you can do this thing that speaks to you and hopefully does good out in the community too.
Wonderful. Do you think that you'll ever get back into the newsroom?
People can come back, but all the time, every time we try, somebody gets COVID, gives it to somebody, and then, and people, it works for their lives to be home some of the time. So there's certainly people in there any given day. There's maybe 10 or 12, a few people, a handful. And we try to do events together, but I don't think that they want to, and I'm not going to force them.
There you go. Leanne Colachiapo, thank you so very much for gracing our Bima, our Yom Kippur afternoon. Truth is a very, very valuable commodity, and it is essential for all of us. And I really admire you and want to thank you for helping us get a better understanding of what the truth is.
Thank you so much for having me.
My honor. You're welcome anytime. And we will be continuing very shortly with our afternoon service. You're allowed to clap. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Sure. Welcome. All right.
We have mentioned over the course of our service on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, the prayers are both on the screen and in the book, so you are welcome to use either. We are going to begin the rest of our Mincha experience right now.
פתח לנו שער ביד נעילת שער כי פניו היום יפנה השמש יבוא ויפנה נבוא שעריך נבוא שעריך
text just said, open a gate for us when the gates are being closed, for the day is about to fade. The day shall end, the sun shall set, and I want to call your attention to that window. Rabbi Foster made me promise when I spoke to him this morning that I would point out this window, and I am so glad he did. This beautiful, beautiful sanctuary that we have been so blessed for almost 70 years as a congregation to celebrate in, to rejoice in, to grieve in, is a remarkable architectural feat. And you may notice that the ark does not point east like most synagogues do towards Jerusalem. It doesn't mean that we're not directed towards Jerusalem, but our architect was very clear that he wanted this day to reflect the east over there. And so when we came this morning, the sun was shining through that window, and as we have moved along the day, and now as we come to close to the end of our Yom Kippur day, that window is ablaze with light and beauty. And so we are so blessed to have this. And it's important that we understand that is the legacy of Temple Emanuel, one of the many legacies that we celebrate as part of our holy congregation.
Page 612. The long day is over and the gates are closing. Slowly, day fades into dusk. Soon the earth will darken. Our bodies weak and weary, our inner strength undiminished.
Together, this day has been a gift, uncluttered time, a time to face our sins and imperfections, our dreams and yearnings for the life we want to live, a time to leave the clamor of the world and attend to the voice within.
At this hour, the gates of Yom Kippur begin to close. Have we done all that needed to be done, said everything that needed to be said?
Together, the gates of God's compassion never close, but soon enough our lives close in on us. Now in the silence of the soul, now before the holy day comes to an end, release the unshed tears, the deepest prayers locked in our hearts.
Ana elna sana salachna mechona chamona rachena kapelna. Ana elna sana salachna mechona chamona rachena kapelna.
It has become our beautiful tradition over the years that on Yom Kippur afternoon, we celebrate, welcome, are inspired and led by the past presidents of our congregation. They will be blessing us with a blessing, literally, of our congregation, our leadership, who we are, who we hope to be, who we were. And as we edge ever closer to our 150th anniversary, it is with great joy that we invite our past presidents to enter our beautiful sanctuary. It is with great joy we invite our past presidents. I know Steve Stark is wrangling them as we speak. Here they come.
all generations, once again we come to you at this most sacred time of the year.
We, who have been privileged to serve as presidents of Temple Emanuel, ask your blessing on our holy congregation.
May our community continue, thank you, and remain strong even during times of difficulty. May our clergy and professional staff be strengthened by our support.
May our current president and the trustees who serve be guided with wisdom and vision.
May all their decisions and deliberations reflect our highest values as a Reformed Jewish community.
May their service bring them joy, fulfillment, and purpose, and may they go from strength to strength.
For all of you who are here on this holy day of Yom Kippur to share the search for meaning and renewal, your presence is a blessing, your friendship a gift.
May the spirit of peace, dignity, and respect live within these walls, inspiring us to care for one another with compassion. And may we be a source of goodness, light, and healing for the world.
Bless us, O God, on this holiest day of the year. May our prayers be acceptable in your sight as we ask forgiveness for our transgressions. Bless us with your mercy.
Watch over our beloved congregation. Keep us strong and focused. Help us to serve as a beacon of spiritual depth and communal commitment.
May the new year 5783 be filled with healing and hope, meaning and purpose.
We give thanks for the ability to come together in strength and hope as we work to create a better future.
Let us renew ourselves for the year ahead. Let us honor our special legacy. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you to our past presidents. Your continued love of and support of and participation in our holy community is truly a gift. And now you may recess. Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, John. Thank you much. You have a bad habit of falling on this beamer. I said. So a few words about our wonderful tradition that we introduced a few years ago during the Yom Kippur afternoon services when we begin to read the book of Jonah. You know, when I grew up, Maftir Yonah, the honor of chanting from the book of Jonah or blessing Jonah was a huge honor. My father used to get that honor at our synagogue, so it always means a lot to me. But in order to make this ancient story more prescient, we have asked members of our community to reflect on key passages from the book while teaching us how those texts relate both to essential issues we are facing and how their personal and professional experiences provides a lens through which we all might benefit. This year, a year of where we are coming out of isolation, when we are very much aware of our individuality, we want thinking about the power of an individual and how we can take what happens to us and use it to create opportunity for change and growth for ourselves and for those around us. So we're going to have 3 different speakers, all of whom, in our opinion, have made a huge impact on our community because of what they believe, what they do, and how they live out their values. So during the course, we want to now, do we have room up here? No, okay, we'll call you up one at a time. We want to call up, we're going to be hearing from Jamie Sarche. Jamie has been a one-person voter registration drive. Come on up, Jamie. And she'll tell us about how she has been so effective. We're also going to hear from Eileen Bennett, who took a real tragedy in her family and used it to improve the world through a program that she is working on called Beads of Courage. And finally, from Zach Goldich, who is a remarkable person who was present at the Aurora Theater when the shooting occurred. Zach is an athlete, as you will see when he towers over me, even if I'm standing on this step here. But he's going to talk about his hero's journey and the Zach Goldish Opportunity Scholarships when the time comes. And each of them is going to reflect not only on what they have done, but how it relates to specific passages from the book of Jonah. So we begin with the bracha for reading the Haftarah.
I would also like to invite at this time our 3 Jonah chanters, Hagit Wasserman, Marielle Gerber, and Chaya O'Grady, to come and join us on the bima as we say our bracha.
The blessing before the reading of the Haftarah can be found on page 342. Please join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'invi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek.
Baiman Adonai da gadol livloa et Yonah vayehi Yonah bim'ei hadag shelosha yamim ushlosha lelot vayitpalel Yonah el Adonai Elohav mim'ei hadaga vayomer karati mitzarali El Adonai vaya'aneni mi beten she'ol shivati shamata koli vatashlicheni metzula bilvav yamim venahar yesoveveni kol mishparecha vegalecha alai avaru va'ani amarti nigrashti mineged enecha Ach, osif lehabit el hechal kodshecha.
We now want to call up Eileen Bennett.
At her service, the rabbi said, "Parents aren't meant to lose their children, but we did. The grief of losing a child is beyond anything we could have ever planned for. Like Jonah, grief immobilizes you. It compresses you inside a skin so thick that you can't breathe, can't think, can't imagine life without her. reaching out for support because of the void, the pit in my stomach, the silence that surrounded me. A wise and caring cantor telling me that maybe she was silent on purpose, giving me space to grieve, to rest, giving me time to start to imagine a world without her. Words on her headstone that read, "Beautiful, courageous, strong, and may her neshama continue to shine." What do these words mean? How do we ensure Naomi's spirit continues to shine and make a difference in others' lives? When I contemplated this, a few words from a poem read at her funeral helped me imagine how to use my grief to honor Naomi's legacy. Remember, love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. Give her away. How could we share her strength and courage with others who are suffering? Give the love we have for Naomi by giving to others, by creating a Naomi legacy that will continue to shine for years to come. What exactly does legacy mean? A lasting impact on the world. It's a gift that is passed down through generations. Leaving a legacy means dreaming big and changing the world for the better. Naomi participated in the Beads of Courage program at Children's Hospital, Colorado, an innovative arts and medicine program that was designed to help improve the quality of life for children with chronic health conditions. For every test, treatment, and procedure, patients receive a bead honoring their courage, strength, and hope. In celebration of Naomi, an endowment at Children's Hospital Colorado now funds a new Beads of Courage program, specifically for children on the 9th floor. The fund also helped to create a special mosaic art piece that was created by a Colorado artist. The mosaic hangs in the lobby of the 9th floor, where Naomi spent many nights. The artwork includes beads from Naomi's personal Beads of Courage collection, as well as colors and symbols that capture her spirit. Its presence there on the 9th floor, helping to create a space for other families to bask in Naomi's beauty, courage, and strength. Also, in the spirit of Naomi, a new Naomi dream bead, which I'm wearing, is given to each new patient who is enrolled in Beads of Courage on the 9th floor, a bead that creates a way for every child to represent creativity in their own way, a bead that inspires a child to always follow their dreams. The sages say, we read Jonah to be reminded that this tumultuous, contradictory, difficult space is in fact the space of prayer and possibility. Thank you, Naomi, for giving me this space to grieve and to create the possibility of making a difference in the lives of other children and families. Shana Tova.
Vayehi Devar Adonai El Yonah Shenit Lemor Kum Lech El Ninveh Ha'ir Hagdolah Ukra Elecha Et Hakriya Asher Anochi Dover Elecha Vayakom Yonah Vayelech El Ninveh Kidvar Adonai Veninveh הייתה עיר גדולה לאלוהים, מחלך 3 ימים. ויהל יונה לעבור בעיר, מחלך יום אחד. ויקרא ויאמר עוד 40 יום, וננבא נפחד.
Jamie Sarche.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
I am so grateful to Rabbi Black for inviting me to share my passion for helping people get registered to vote. I've been doing this volunteer work for about a decade and have registered thousands of people at festivals, concerts, farmers markets, Bed Bath & Beyond. Friends always wonder why I would bother with those who just don't seem to care enough to participate. But that has never been my experience. When I'm out at these places, people are so happy to see me. They always thank me for being there and for helping them with something so important. Most people think that if they move within the same city, the same county, it doesn't affect their voter registration. But they're wrong. If you move, you become an inactive voter. Ballots are not forwarded. So even if you move next door, you have to update your address with the Secretary of State. Though I register plenty of 18-year-olds and new Coloradans, I do a lot of updating. When I read the story of Jonah, it seemed to me that Jonah did not want to take on the task that God assigned. He was afraid he would not make a difference, but each step he took into Nineveh convinced him and those around him that the work was worthwhile. For me, registering voters is also a sacred task, but it's one I take on joyfully, and I do not have to be convinced that it makes a difference. Voting is our most foundational right. It's the basis for our citizenship in this country. I've registered a 70-year-old who just became a citizen and a 44-year-old who recently returned to society after his prison term. Last weekend, I used a texting platform to contact 27,000 inactive voters to help them update their registration. When I'm worried about the safety net, about women's ability to make their healthcare decisions, about my LGBTQ friends' rights, about climate change, about democracy itself, and come on, these days I worry pretty often, and you might as well. Registering voters makes me feel a lot better. It fills me up, and I know it makes a difference. Colorado really has the gold standard of voting. Every active voter receives a ballot in the mail. They can fill it out at their kitchen table and turn it into a box at a light rail station or a library. So let me ask you, are you registered to vote at your current address? And if not, let me know, and I'll help.
Chagit Wasserman.
ויצא יונה מן העיר, וישב מקדם לעיר, ויעש לו שם סוכה, וישב תחתיה בצל, עד אשר יראה מה יהיה בעיר. וימן אדוני אלוהים קיקיון ויעל מעל ליונה להיות צל על ראשו להצילו מרעתו. וישמח יונה על הקיקיון שמחה גדולה. וימן האלוהים תולעת בעלות השחר למחרת. ותח את הקיקיון ויבש. ויהי כזרוח השמש. וימן אלוהים רוח קדים חרישית. ותח השמש על ראש יונה ויתעלף. וישאל את נפשו למות. ויאמר טוב מותי מחיי. ויאמר אלוהים אל יונה ההיטב חרה לך על הקיקיון. ויאמר היטב חרה לי עד מוות. ויאמר אדוני אתה חסת על הקיקיון אשר לא עמלת בו ולא גידלתו, שבן לילה היה ובן לילה עבד. ואני לא אחוס על ננבי העיר הגדולה, אשר יש בה הרבה מ12 ריבו אדם, אשר לא ידע בין ימינו לשמאלו, ובהמה רבה.
Thank you, Chagit. Beautiful. I want to call Zach Golditch.
Shana Tova. Yeah, so before I can get on to my part of the story, I think it's important to know a little bit of the background and how I got to this part. So I'm 27, I'm from Aurora, Colorado. I went to Gateway High School. Throughout my time at Gateway, between my junior and senior year, I was attending the Aurora Theater to watch the Batman movie. I was struck in the neck by a bullet while I was sitting in the adjacent theater that night. I was able to finish high school, with a great experience, and then received a full ride scholarship to attend Colorado State University, where I played football as an offensive lineman. Graduated as a first-generation student, and then played a year and a half in the NFL. And when I was finished playing in the NFL, I looked back at all my experiences and all the people, and reflected on all the people who had got me to where I was at. I got to live my childhood dream of, playing Division I football, playing in the NFL, and I couldn't help but to realize that it was now that I was out of the spotlight, my time had passed. It was time to come back and uplift somebody else, as my entire community had uplifted me. So this summer, I was very fortunate, and I teamed up with the 720 Memorial Foundation that was created shortly after the shooting, the Aurora Public Schools Foundation, and a couple of other generous sponsors that helped us create the Hero's Journey 5K that took place this July. This 5K was a fundraiser for a scholarship called the Zach Golditch Opportunity Scholarship, and it was designed for a student who reflected a student who was just an overall community member and a well active member within their school. And so the event was great. We had over 200 runners. We raised $15,000. And this next year, we're gonna award a $10,000 scholarship, which will be the most in the Aurora Public Schools Foundation history, to a student that may be deprived of an opportunity due to the financial burden of higher education. And I think it's an incredible opportunity for that student coming up. And as I reflect on this as a whole, I know that I wouldn't have been able to get to where I was by myself. Yes, a lot of it sometimes was by myself, but with the endless support, love, and encouragement from my community, my family, my friends, I couldn't help but to think that I could take that energy and shine that on somebody else. So then hopefully, when that student who receives a scholarship or anybody who hears the story will be encouraged to help uplift others moving forward. So thank you so much for having me tonight.
Each of our speakers reflects a central theme of the book of Jonah. And that is that God called to Jonah and said, go to Nineveh, make a difference. And Jonah didn't want to, didn't think he could, but he did. And so to all of you, thank you so much for the difference you are making in the world. We are truly blessed to have you in our community, and may this be a year of continuing to make a difference. Thank you. You guys can go sit
We are
down.
going to finish with our concluding blessing, which can be found on page 351. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzadik bechol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer ve'oseh, hamdaber u'mkayem, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek, al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al ha'nevi'im ve'al yom ha'kippurim hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu limchila ve'lislicha u'chapara lechavod u'tifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach Umbarchim otach, yitbarach shimcha befi kol chai, tamid leolam va'ed, udvarcha emet vekayam la'ad. Baruch atah Adonai. Melech mochel v'soleach la'avonotenu, ve'la'avonot amo beit Yisrael, u'ma'avir ashmotenu, v'chol shana v'shana. Melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh Yisrael, ve'yom ha'kippurim. Amen.
With great gratitude to our chanters and speakers, it is with Jonah in our minds that we continue our mincha service into the final recitation of the great Aleinu that we will do on these high holy days. And if you participated in Rosh Hashanah, you might have seen the great Aleinu already. It is the regular Aleinu, except for we come to it with such humility, with such understanding of how little we are in the world. And as we think of the story of Jonah, and we hold sort of two things about him. He had a lot of power, and this story about him, he was really an important character. And we're reminded of his humanity, of his ability to go through it just like the rest of us, and to sometimes feel unbelievably small. And so here we are in Mincha, we are at our emptiest. We are spiritually full, physically, not so much. And so in this final time of prostration, as we call it, when cantor sax goes all the way down to the floor in order to feel and be small in front of God. She does it with the utmost of humility on behalf of all of us. After the great Aleinu, we have a tradition in this community of a meditation moment. We will leave the doors, the curtains of the ark open. And if you are interested, or if it is your custom, we invite you to take a moment up at the ark in front of the Torah, the many Torah scrolls that we have in the ark, if that moves you, in order to be closer to this idea that we have of standing before God in these final moments. And so when that moment approaches, we ask you to please keep your space. This is a quiet, silent moment that you may take, and to make room for others in that as well. And with that, we turn to page 436. It is written, "Know before whom you stand, but in truth we do not know."
Together, perhaps we stand before our history, a chronicle of stubbornness, quiet heroism, and the will to live.
Perhaps it is the memory of those who struggled to be human in a world that was dark and cold.
Perhaps it is Torah that summons us to rise, the golden chain of tradition, a reverence for learning, permission to question and doubt.
Perhaps we stand before ideals that call us to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly on this earth.
Perhaps it is the awe at the kinship of all that live, or the unknowable, unnameable mystery that brought us here.
We stand together, seekers, doubters, and those who are firm in their faith, and this we know.
The day is short, the work immense, the laborers are reluctant, the reward is great, and the need is urgent.
We turn to page 432 and rise as we are able for the great Aleinu.
לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Even though the ark is open, you may be seated. Those who wish to ascend the bima, now is the time to do so. We ask that you respect the silence of this moment as well.
Page 628. Hear us this day. Forgive us, we pray. For the day begins to fade, your holiness awakens deepest awe. Your praise shall be our song.
Our sovereign God of pardon and forgiveness, let these words of sanctity ascend to you.
Open the gates of righteousness for us. Open the gates that we may enter and praise the eternal.
Together, open the gates for us, for all Israel and for people everywhere. The gates of acceptance and atonement, beauty and creativity. The gates of dignity, empathy, and faith. The gates of generosity and hope, insight and joy. The gates of knowledge and love, meaning and nobility. The gates of openness, patience, and the quest for peace. The gates of renewal, song, and tranquility. The gates of understanding and virtue. The gates of wisdom and wonder, exaltation, youth, and old age. The gates of Zion, reborn and rebuilt in our time. Open the gates, open them wide. Show us the way to enter.
We rise physically or spiritually as you are able, and we turn to the middle of page 646.
Adonai, God compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving and true, showing mercy to the thousandth generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon.
Adonai, Adonai, El Racham v'chanan, Erech Apayim v'Rav Chesed v'Yemet, Notzer Chesed la'alafim.
Vayomer Adonai, salachti kidvarecha. And God responded, I forgive as you have asked.
Page 665. As the book of life is closed and sealed, open our hearts, open our hands. Let those who asked forgiveness and those who gave forgiveness depart this day in peace. Let all God's seekers and soul searchers of this day depart this day inspired and renewed. Together, let us build a community of commitment.
Let all of us be sealed this day, Gamar Chatima Tova, sealed for goodness and sealed for life, B'Sefer Chaim Tovim, sealed in the book of life and good, eager to taste life's sweetness, to enjoy the fruit of our labors, to bring light to the darkness and joy where sorrow swells.
Be sealed for a year of Torah and soulful searching. Be sealed for a year of kindness, good deeds, and love. As the book of life is closed and sealed, open our hands, open our hearts.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu va'aneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu va'aneinu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh
Page 662. Avinu Malkeinu kabel barachaminu v'ratzon et tfilatenu. Together, Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, welcome our prayer with love, accept and embrace it.
Avinu Malkeinu, aseh lama'an rachamecha harabim. Avinu Malkeinu, act for the sake of your boundless compassion.
Avinu Malkeinu, aseh imanu lama'an shemecha. Avinu Malkeinu, act toward us as befits your name.
Avinu Malkeinu, chotmeinu b'sefer parnasa v'chalkala. Avinu Malkeinu, seal us in the book of sustenance and livelihood.
Avinu Malkeinu Chotmeinu B'Sefer Zichuyot. Avinu Malkeinu, seal us in the book of worthiness and merit.
Avinu Malkeinu Chotmeinu B'Sefer Slicha Mechila. Avinu Malkeinu, seal us in the book of forgiveness and pardon.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chotmeinu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, seal us in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chotmeinu B'Sefer Geula V'Yeshua. Avinu Malkeinu, seal us in the book of redemption and renewal.
Avinu Malkeinu, Malei Yadenu Mibirchotecha. Avinu Malkeinu, let our hands overflow with your blessings.
Avinu Malkeinu, Petach Sha'arei Shamayim Litfilatenu. Avinu Malkeinu, let the gates of heaven be open to our prayer.
Avinu Malkeinu Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu, renew us for a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, Ein Lanu Melech Ela Ata. Avinu Malkeinu, we have no sovereign but you.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Va'anenu, Ki Ein Banu Ma'asim. Aseh Imanu Tzedaka V'Chesed V'Hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace when our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Aseh Imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed. Aseh Imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, ve'oshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu va'anenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu va'anenu, Ki ein banu masim.
Page 670. We stand as one before the gates of a new year, renewed by this day of atonement, made stronger by all who are with us and by those whose presence we feel within.
As the long day fades into dusk, we join our voices in words of hope and dedication.
Pitchu lanu sha'arei tzedek navovam nodeya. Open for us the gates of righteousness, that we may enter and praise the eternal source of life.
Open for us the gates of sacred community, that we may enter and feel its healing power.
Open for us the gates of truth and integrity, that we may enter and grow in faithfulness.
Open for us the gates of devotion and principle, that we may enter and find enduring values and meaning.
Open for us the gates of repentance and return, that we may enter and offer our best.
Open for us the gates of forgiveness, that we may enter and offer our humanity.
Open for us the gates of kindness and compassion, that we may enter and offer our love.
We continue on page 671. At this time, I invite our shofar sounders, and if anyone has a shofar that you wish to bring up here, please join us. Neil, come up. As the Sabbath of Sabbath ends, we say from the heart together, living source, you are ours, we are yours.
From beyond time and space, You hold out your hand to receive us. Living source, you are ours. We are yours.
You are the sovereign of remembrance, the voice of holiness. Your presence lights the way.
Living source, you are ours and we are yours.
Shema Yisrael, hear the shofar, witness to history, thunder to our souls.
Living source,
you are ours,
we are yours.
Happy are those who love the sound of the shofar, its mystic chords of memory.
Living source, you are ours, we are yours. Hear the shofar, hear its cry of freedom, its call of courage, cherish its promise of hope.
Page 672.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Adonai hu ha'Elohim. Adonai hu ha'Elohim. Adonai hu ha'Elohim. Adonai hu ha'Elohim. Tekiah. Shevarim. Teruah. Tekiah Gedolah.
And as we conclude our service on this day, you can stay with me. We close with Havdalah, with words of separation, knowing that this has been a long day. And so we prepare to separate not with our minds, but with our senses. We will feel the heat of the candle, taste the wine, smell the spices, and hear our voices, because we need what is physical right now, not what is intellectual. And so we invite you, if you are interested and comfortable, but only if you are interested and comfortable, to come a little closer. Our tradition here is that we gather together out of the rows of the seats for Havdalah. If you feel comfortable with that, we invite you to come just a little forward.
Words aren't hard. Yai lai lai. Yai lai 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 lai.
Yai lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai, yai lai lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai lai, yai lai lai. Yai lai lai.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri agafen borei peri agafen
Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai, yai lai lai.
Baruch atah
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei besamim borei minei besamim Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai, yai lai lai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh borei meorei ha'esh Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai, yai lai lai.
Eloheinu v'Elohei kol dorotenu. Our God and God of every generation, we have journeyed these past 25 hours together. A journey within, where we found the loneliness of the soul. And then we emerge as a community, a kihila kedosha, a sacred congregation, aware of your presence in our lives with hope for the future, committed to building a world of peace, a world of opportunity, a world of healing, of health and wholeness. God, we thank you for this incredible community. We ask your blessing on this new year. As we separate from the holiness of Yom HaKippurim to the beginning of the new year, we do so with love and with song on our lips.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavir ben kodesh lechol. There it goes.
המבדיל בין קודש לחול. יאי לי 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 יאי לי לי
Shana Tova, Shana Tova, Shana Tova. A good year, a year of peace. May gladness reign, and joy increase. A good year, a year of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase.
Shana Tova tikatevu v'techatemu. May it be a wonderful year. We'll see in 5 days for Sukkot.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.